Hi there and happy Friday. Welcome to Big Sister Conversation number 5. It's been such an amazing journey. And if you are new here, what we usually do before starting our chat or Big Sister Conversation is doing 3 deep breaths, and I'm feeling much better as compared to how I felt last Friday, and praying that I will be completely healed by the time this video goes live. So 3 wholesome deep breaths, 1 long breath through your nose and a wholesome deep breath out of your mouth. All right, let's go. As I was taking my 3rd deep breath, I was actually thinking about something I needed to do for someone before this video. And I was just thinking about how I feel personally, right? I'd say pressured when I post something to my status, because obviously it shows that I'm online on WhatsApp, but I haven't responded to your message. I don't know if it's just me, but we'll take this as a sound check, because I'm realizing, I hope that person doesn't feel some type of way. This is a sound check. So welcome to our 5th, tired, not sure where we're at in terms of the count, but welcome to Big Sister Chat. This is a space where I get to share my thoughts and I'd say views around certain life themes. And in the past few insights that we've had, we've talked about forgiveness, we've talked about money, I've talked about leadership from the perspective of being a big sister to 6 beautiful human beings. I've talked about death, interestingly, as well. So that's 4 conversations that we've gone through so far. Welcome to today's episode. I am Gorata.Selaledi, and I'm truly excited, truly honored as well to be here on this platform. If you are new here, I am a faith-based content creator, and I create new content every Sunday, Monday, and Friday. And it gives me so much joy. 2 things: coaching and also Bible study, or standing on the Word of God. All right, so I think the 2 things, or the joy that I've been getting from this platform, is being consistent in both, working on my coaching practice and also working on my relationship with God while I'm helping others do that for themselves as well. So if you are looking for a space where you can actually work on your faith journey, and if you are looking for free coaching programs that will lead to your own transformation, please do click on the subscription button and the notification bell so that you are notified when new videos come up. And if you are a returning subscriber, this is for you. Perfect heart. Thank you so much for supporting the vision, or supporting the journey, for clicking on the videos as they go up every other day. Thank you for stopping by, for leaving the comments. Those who engage with me, the engagement gives me so much joy, because obviously in recording in an empty room all by myself, but once you've watched the video and something has stood out for you, it truly warms my heart to actually realize that what I am doing is making an impact in someone's life. So please do leave a comment, leave your thoughts even after this conversation. So today I've decided to title our Big Sister Chat Big Emotions. And the question is, when last did you cry? Right? When last did you cry? So I did a certification, I think during COVID, life coaching certificate on emotional intelligence coaching, right? And it basically just gives you tools on how to build your EQ, how to manage your emotions, personal power, stress reduction, motivation, and, right? And I think over the past 4 years, going on 5 years now, I have been coaching on the same matter, and truly what I've learned for myself is the realization that as we're growing up or as we're children, nobody actually teaches us how to navigate our emotions. So today I am going to be talking to anyone younger than me, right? And I'm going to be talking to anyone my age but has emotions that they haven't dealt with. I'm going to be talking to anyone older than me, but sometimes when you're experiencing certain emotions, you actually feel like you're that little girl or that little boy who never actually got the chance to feel, one, acknowledge, and actually release the emotion connected to that lived experience, right? So today we're going to be talking about big emotions, right? Big emotions. And the big emotions that personally for me, I never got an opportunity to actually, I'd say, confidently feel, confidently figure out where they come from, and also figure out what to do with it when I was growing up. And my big emotions were anger, sadness, depression, and frustration. And what I want you to do, and what I'm going to do as I edit, I'm just actually going to put this here, and list of emotions, or maybe put it under community. Yeah. And the reason why I want to do this for you is for you to be able to actually have a space where you can actually refer to figure out what emotions you're feeling, right? So I recently concluded a program that I was doing through my business in collaboration with Corporate Millennial, where I was leading them through a four-part program that was centered around emotional intelligence. And I really want to have a conversation with you today, at the core of it, helping you, I think, just understand and get to a place where you are able to label your emotions. Something that I learned, I think, in a very big way from the certification for emotional intelligence was that in your path, or in your quest to actually figure out and navigate managing and influencing your emotion, which is a component of EQ, where you're self-regulating, self-managing, right? Before you can even get there, it is important to build a certain level of self-awareness, right? Self-awareness, being able to actually look and see and say, that is what I'm feeling, right? And an exercise that I want for us to learn at the heart of today's video is you being able to identify, right? You being able to identify the big emotion that you are struggling with. So I struggled, and a reflection that I wrote in my journal as I was preparing for this episode is to say that, I look back in my own life and I realized that I never allowed myself to get mad, like to genuinely get mad or get angry. And what I mean by that is I never allowed myself to feel the emotion of anger, right? When I've been wronged by someone, what I'd choose to do is to brush off the emotion and go along as if nothing happened, right? So I would be, maybe just to put it mildly, to say the peacemaker. But I didn't choose peace because I'm brushing off this emotion, there's resentment that is building towards this person, whether they know it, whether I know it, but subconsciously I have been building this wall of resentment towards this person. You're not talking to that person, you're not visiting that person. And a reflection that I had, funny enough, following the conversation that I had about my dad, is realizing even lately to say that there are certain repressed emotions, these big emotions that I hadn't allowed myself to feel. To say, yes, I was actually angry when this happened, and I didn't allow myself to actually process the anger. I was sad. There was a lot of sadness, but the anger that I felt, and I'd say the depression that I lived through, was never acknowledged. The frustration that I carried was never acknowledged. And I think because they weren't acknowledged, or what I'm coming to understand about our emotions, because they aren't acknowledged, we will live through, I'd say, similar experiences, and we'll never actually take away the lesson from that lived experience. We never get the opportunity to learn, right? Which is, I think, the big takeaway that I'd want you to actually get today, even as we think about big emotions, to say each and every one of your emotions, like I was sharing about the anger that I never allowed myself to feel, that anger was coming in to actually tell me how I am perceiving my lived experience, right? And I'm realizing now, sorry for doing that in the mic, realizing now that I actually didn't define what emotions are. That should have been the starting point, right? So my favorite definition of emotion that I've learned as I was certifying, as I was reading, going through different books, is emotions being explained as our reaction towards our lived experience, right? So if something happens, if someone calls me right now and says, "Yo, Gorata, I'm coming over your house," or my mom calls me right now and says, "I'm outside the gate," the emotion that is going to come up is joy, excitement, because I miss her a lot, right? So whatever experience or whatever lived experience that you live through, like sometimes when I'm recording, there's flies flying all around me, and the emotion that's usually triggered is annoyance. And I usually see it in some of the videos when as I'm editing, and I'm like, oof, girl was getting annoyed. So your emotions come in to actually then signal, right, to signal to you your perception or how you're perceiving that lived experience. You'd find that the same experience, similar experience, will be perceived very differently by different people and will elicit different emotions to different people. To some, the same exact moment might elicit frustration. To some, it might elicit excitement. It might elicit, contentment, gratitude. It might elicit confusion. Whatever it is, right, that is happening around you, there will be an emotion that is triggered. But what I've seen, or what I looking back in my life, is to realize that I never actually learned how to navigate these things that are called emotions, especially as I was living through my teens, because I think when you lived through your teens, it felt as though your emotions were magnified 100 times 1,000, right? When I'm feeling frustrated, when I'm feeling depressed, when I'm feeling angry, when I'm feeling sad, all of those emotions are so loud, right? But what I never did was to allow myself to actually sit and process and ask myself, why am I angry? I couldn't even get to that place because I didn't know how to label that emotion. So I'm going to take you through an exercise. I'm going to take you through an exercise on how to label your emotions, how to label these big emotions, right? And from the list of emotions that I've shared, and all rights reserved to Dr. Susan David, she is the author of Emotional Agility. I would want for you to save the list. You can actually Google it and just say list of emotions, Susan David, or go to my community tab and see it there. And save that image for yourself, right? And what I want us to do for the rest of the month of November and the rest of our lives, even as we learn how to navigate big emotions, right, is to learn to figure out how we're feeling right after we wake up, right before we go to bed. So usually when you're having a conversation with someone, it usually goes something like this. Hi, how are you? And the answer that people usually give, and I think it's become such a common response, is to say, I'm good. How's life? Everything's good. You know, in as much as ultimately that is a nice answer to give to yourself, even as you're doing that exercise, it's a disservice, because are you really good? Right? Or are you anxious about the meeting that is coming in 2 days? And what I'm learning about emotions, just as a by the way, is to say that they're actually here to give you information that you can use, right? So after explaining the labeling exercise, obviously, what I'd want for you to actually realize is, even as the emotion creeps up, that anxiety about the meeting creeps up, you have a decision to make to then say, why am I feeling anxious? Obviously figure that out first, but then the decision would be tied to then, what are you going to do about it? You know, all of this nice information about how anxious you are and how the anxiety is growing, but what are you going to do about it ultimately, right? So you figured out that you are anxious before you go to bed. What are you going to do about it? Maybe you can wake up earlier than you usually do to start preparing, right? So, because when you wake up tomorrow, you'd have 1 day left before the day of the meeting. Maybe wake up earlier to prepare, to read, right? For both days, so that by the time the meeting arrives, at least you've done your part in terms of preparing and rehearsing, and the rest would be left to fate, if at all. But the rest would be left to God, right, to figure you through that moment. But what I want to encourage you to do is to go to your calendar, or go to your reminders, and set a reminder. Set a reminder for yourself to check in with yourself, right? So before you go to bed, I'm going to do that too for myself. Before you go to bed and before you start your day, ask yourself, how am I? Or how are you? You can actually ask yourself in third person, how are you really? Right? Maybe you're feeling anxious, maybe you're feeling content, maybe you're feeling grateful. And the next question would be, why are you feeling that way? Or phrased another way, what happened to you? What happened? What happened? And the last question would be, what are you going to do about it? Right? Are you going to pray about it? Or do you need to talk to someone about it? Or do you need to start preparing for it? But what action are you going to take? Because that emotion has creeped up on you to give you useful information, right? So I really wanted to come on today's video. Something in my heart kept saying, speak plainly, right? So I'm going to leave it for last, because I know that people only watch a few minutes and, then come back, I hope, after a while. But a reflection that was on my heart that I'd want to really share today is feeling and dealing with either family-related hurt, church-related hurt, dealing with the anger that I have felt or that I haven't allowed myself to feel in this case, right? And I just want to share this, I think, just as my story, given that I think that's the biggest component of the Big Sister conversation to say. But okay, Gorata, you've taught us about emotions, you've taught us about how they are friends and how they give us information, right? But what about you? What have you lived through that has actually triggered these emotions, or these big emotions, namely anger, sadness, depression, and frustration? So my reflection, just gonna share, and I sat the other day and I was reflecting on how I am too nice, right? I saw this other post on LinkedIn that was differentiating being nice to being kind, and I realized I'm too nice, right? And have been over the past few years. I allowed too much, right? And in thinking about it, how I was thinking about it is to say, I allowed, I'd say, to be treated in certain ways by certain people. I allowed them, right? I held the space for them, even as they mistreated me. I never really voiced it out or, confronted it. I allowed too much. And the other day I was also just thinking to say, but in a relationship, it's, I'd say, give and take. And I realized that I never ask for much. Or I never really truly ask for much from the people in my life. And I crucified myself to then say, Mekhwane, that's why. It's like everyone is, operating the way they're operating, because you never truly give them an opportunity, if I was to say, to show up for you, or to call them to show up for you, if I was to say. But then in also just thinking about instances where they don't, or they choose not to, you allow it, or I've allowed it, and I've allowed too much, when I allow that moment to actually come and go without actually confronting it. And in thinking about emotions, to then say, if I allow myself to get to a place to recognize the emotion, label the emotion, figure out what happened, and answering that ultimate question to then say, what am I going to do about it? There's so much freedom there, because I feel even going forward, going into my, the rest of adulthood, I will move differently, right? And it's been hard. I remember, I think the one big confrontation I had with one of my friends, where I sat down and I said, I don't like how our friendship is structured, right? I feel we don't show up enough for each other. We don't hang out as much as we should. And I remember crying. And what that moment did, it changed and it switched something within the dynamic of our relationship. And I realize now that there's certain conversations that I need to have with certain people. I don't know about you, but there's certain conversations that I need to have as and when life happens with certain people, to express where my mind is at, especially when certain emotions are triggered. Obviously, from a place of respect, being very respectful, being very mindful that you are building and trying to strengthen the relationship, but not trying to tear it down. So what I also noted down is that over the past 30 years, I never allowed myself to be angry. Remember, I talked about anger being the big emotion, right? I feel like all of my life, bulk of the one thing that I did was to smile, right? I think I had a fake or elusive space of peace when underneath there was something that was rumbling, and I can finally put my finger on it and say, oh my goodness, it's anger, right? It's anger. And what I noted down is to say, I then sat down, and for me personally, given that I am an eternal beginner in this Christian walk, walking with God, I had a conversation with him to then say, but this actually makes me very angry, right? How things are playing out and what is being said in this moment. And I really took time to identify those things to myself, to God, constructively and objectively, right? To figure out who did those things. So where is this anger being triggered from, by whom? and most importantly for me, praying about the said hurt. Like I said when I opened, I don't know if I said at the opening of this conversation, to say that I look back over my life and I realize that certain emotions I never had an avenue to experience, right? But you realize that right now, at this point in my time of my life, I am 30, and maybe the things happened when I was 18. So it serves me. It doesn't serve me nor the people that are involved for me to hold on to that hurt anymore. So it is important. Prayer in this case for me, what it does is it helps me to actually release that hurt, right? And also going for therapy this year has been, I'd say, one of the big things that has helped me to be able to release those emotions as well. And the last thought is, like I had shared earlier, to say I look back and I realize I never allowed myself to get mad genuinely, right? To get angry, because what I realize is what anger comes to show is that something is off in terms of alignment, right? In terms of what I value versus what that person values. And it's important for clarity to be established for the sake of the relationship, right? So I will allow myself to get pissed, to get mad, but I will not allow the emotion to rule over me going forward. But what I'm allowing it to do is to give me an opportunity to figure out what I am going to do with that piece of information. I will also even ask myself if the way I am perceiving the lived experience is correct, right? I realized that there were a lot of repressed emotions. I remember when I was growing up, I used to cry a lot when, I'll say it plainly, when my dad broke his promise to maybe pass by and pick me up, his promise to come and visit, whatever it was. But in my mind, it felt like World War III, like everything was going wrong because of that broken promise. And I would cry. But when thinking about repressed emotions, I think the key thought that I had in my heart is honoring people to the point where you are able to really figure out the emotion for yourself first, right? So that you are able to be released from it, first of all, and you are able to, secondly, have the courage to confront it for the sake of the relationship. There's a lot of resentment, there's a lot of anger that, like I'd shared, for me, was never, I'd say, unpacked. And what that leads to is repressed emotions such as resentment, such as unforgiveness. And I want to encourage you to go look at or to watch my video where I was sharing my journey with my dad. Not to say I have arrived, but to tease a work in progress now that I realize that there are these repressed emotions, where I talk about forgiveness and how forgiveness was a key for me to peace in a few years ago, in a season of my life where I was preparing to get married, right? So I don't know what big emotions you are sitting with or you are navigating right now in your life, but I want to encourage you, even after this video, take time to go to that list, save it, keep it in your favorites, do the exercise for yourself so that you are able to lead life from a very authentic place, because each and every one of these emotions is not here to play. It's here to reveal something about how you are perceiving your lived experience. And a movie recommendation, I recently actually watched Inside Out 2, and I want to encourage you to watch it, right? It actually kind of just shows the internal landscape of what happens as you're living out your life. And I really like it because it kind of just shows you that as and when life happens, certain emotions will take the fore and will lead that moment because of how you're perceiving that lived experience, right? But each and every one of those emotions, as we've learned from Inside Out 2, are very important and exist for a very specific reason. So I'd want to encourage you to start doing the work and learning how to label your emotions. And I believe in 2025 I will do a full coaching program that is dedicated to learning how to manage your emotions effectively, managing your emotions 101, as we move, I'd say, towards showing up fully as ourselves, as the people that God designed us to be, and not being led by these emotions, but operating from a place of empowerment where we are able to make informed decisions about how we show up in our lives. I feel like today's Big Sister chat was a bit more serious, but I will say that it was inspired by the closing ceremony that I attended, the Corporate Millennial Mentorship Program for the 2024 cohort, and just realizing that this is information that is useful, and the usefulness of it is that it breeds change and it brings light into our lives in how we're showing up, and there is a change that is kind of preceded by what we know. So I hope that the information that I've shared today will bring a bit of light into your life, will bring a blessing into your life as well. And watch the space for when I finally bring out the free coaching program around managing your emotions. Otherwise, thank you so much for tuning in. It has been amazing, and I hope that it has blessed you as a little sister, as a same age, whatever age you are on the spectrum. But I hope that this has blessed you, and it has brought, I'd say, an opportunity and time for you to actually think on your own life. I am Gorata.Selaledi. It has been an honor. I pray that may God's favor locate you, and may His grace sustain you as you live out your life in this coming weekend. Be blessed. Iskavai from me.